Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our session. Really excited to be here. We've got good content we want to share with you. But before I introduce myself, I want you to be introduced to someone that I really look up to, and that's my friend here to my right, Ashok. Maybe you could take a moment to introduce yourself.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us in our session today. I'm sure you'll get a lot out of this session. I'm a data scientist with Cisco, and I'm deeply passionate about building data products that create deep and lasting impact for organizations. I'm going to share with you one of my data products that I created today in the second half of this session. And you may not hear much from me till then. But let me assure you, you're in very good hands. Brian is a strategy guru, at least in the analytics space. He has a clear vision on how organizations should evolve their analytical capabilities. And his ability to translate this vision into strategy and execute on this strategy, I think is second to none. And he's going to share these insights with you today. So stay tuned, sit back, relax, and enjoy the wisdom. Back to you, Brian.
That's too kind. He really is too kind. But let me just tell you that so we're an organization about 1,600 people. And of all the data scientists in our organization, he's by far the most talented. And you know who's delivered the most results that have had real bottom line dollar impact? This guy. And you're going to get to see some of that today. So it's an honor to be up here presenting with him. I actually was not supposed to be your presenter today. It was supposed to be Ashok's grand boss, this guy named Marco, was going to come here and present to you. And so when I found out that they were going to be up here presenting, I decided, right away, well, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be in the audience with all of you. I'm going to be their biggest fan. That was my plan. And then about a week later, Marco calls me up and told me that he had this critical issue to deal with this week at a repair site in Mexico. And so he asked me if I would step in and present for him. And obviously I said yes. But I think it's going to be a good fit because what I'll be able to do is show you kind of the context, the strategy, the framework around the work that Ashok did and part of why it was successful. So here's our agenda. I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about Cisco and Cisco Services just to give you some context. And then I'll spend a few more minutes talking about the Business Analytics Center that I set up and what we, our strategy, our framework, what we've put together there. And then the main event, Ashok's going to share with you a real use case that has multi-million-dollar impact. Not only is he going to show you the impact, he's also going to do a live demo of some of what he created. And then we'll wrap it up with some best practices and some key takeaways that we think you'll be able to take back to your own data practices. So first, just some statistics on Cisco. In case you have never heard of Cisco, it's a really big company that does a lot of different things, mainly data networking products. With a $50 billion annual revenue, it actually puts us firmly in the Fortune 100, probably 59, number 60, somewhere around there. 50 billion is more than the GDP of 120 of the world's countries. The area that we're in, services, getting up to about $12 billion of annual revenue. That on its own, if it was its own company, would also be a Fortune 500 company. So we've got lots of employees, lots of sites, lots of partners doing business in most of the countries around the world. Cisco also very well known for acquisitions and integrating acquisitions quickly. And we've done over 180 since 1993. But imagine the data challenges that creates. Even just integrating one acquisition is challenging, and we've done 180. And despite all that, in all the markets we play in, whether it's through the acquired growth or organic growth, we're generally number one, number two. And look at that, almost as many patents as engineers. But we're at a data conference, so let's understand the direction of correlation here. Just because you join Cisco as an engineer doesn't necessarily mean you get a patent. I mean, maybe, but it's worth a try, but not necessarily. So why am I sharing all of this? It's not so that I can stand up here and brag to you about how awesome Cisco is. Okay, maybe a little, but the real reason is that I really want to convey Cisco is a massive company. And along with a massive company, we have massive data challenges. And at the same time, I think a lot of the challenges that you're going to see that we face, I think all of you face them as well. And so we want to share with you how we approach those challenges in the hope that it'll help you with yours. So just to add a little bit more context about the area that we come from, we're part of Cisco Services. There's a broad set of services across all of our different product areas, across all of our different customer segments. And so as you can imagine, it's a very complex set of services that we offer. And then to drill into that complexity just a bit, what we're here to talk to you about today is our advanced replacement and repair business. And this is part of technical services, so that's the circle up there on the right side, second in. And the way this works is like this. If you are a Cisco customer and you have a service contract with us, and depending on the service level, if your part malfunctions, we can get you a replacement part and an engineer at your door in almost anywhere in the world in 2 hours, or 4 hours, or next business day, depending on what service level you have. But if you imagine behind that, there's a lot of operational process to make that happen. So we have these 1,400 depots around the world, strategically located around our customers, strategically stocked with parts that we know the customers have. And when a part malfunctions, it's easy for us to just shoot it out of the closest depot, and then the game for us is, well, how do we replenish that as quickly and efficiently and as possible? As part of that, we also have about $10 billion in list price value of inventory spread amongst all those depots. But part of how we make that cost effective is by repairing units that come back from the field. Generally, it's much cheaper to repair a unit, bring it back to good as new, but it's cheaper to do that than buy it new from our manufacturing arm at cost, or doing a new buy, as we call it. But even this on its own is a big business. So we've got 13 repair sites around the world on 4 different continents in the world. There's several hundred millions of dollars saved each year by this repair activity. And so I think you're starting to get the sense that everything at Cisco is big. So here's my corner of Cisco Services. I created what's called the Business Analytics Center and drive that. We have this whole list of capabilities and services. I'm not going to read them all to you right now, but I am going to highlight one that's just near and dear to my heart, which is the change management and adoption services. We have just found a night and day difference when we started really focusing on change management and getting really close to our users and really understanding what it would take for them to adopt our dashboards and other data products that we create. It was a night and day difference. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end. It's not quite the point of this presentation today, but it's just something I'm very passionate about. So if you want to talk more about that, find me later in the conference. I'm happy to. So we made a clear decision about 3 years ago to build all of our dashboards in Tableau, and you can see we've built up a critical mass, lots of dashboards, lots of metrics that we've covered, lots of users. By the way, some of those stats are a little stale. We're probably 10 to 20% more than that. It grows every day. And at first, so Tableau has been great. Capturing all of our organization, if you can imagine, with all of that operational process, it's very metric heavy. There's a lot of KPIs. And Tableau, capturing all and representing those KPIs in Tableau really has moved the needle for us in terms of how we understand our business. And at first, it was really easy because a lot of the metrics that the organization was using were tried and true. These were KPIs that have been used for a really long time, very mature, refined, the data underneath was more clear. And so in the first 18 months of using Tableau, we cranked out a lot of these beautiful, fancy, and effective dashboards. And it was great. Our management was very pleased with us, but in a way, it almost made it too easy because it set the bar very high. And then the management expected us to keep the innovation going. But part of the issue that we found is that getting into the more uncharted territory, the data underneath wasn't as refined, the KPIs weren't as well established, and the definition's not as clear. So we had this challenge of we needed to keep moving the needle, but it really wasn't about the visualization, it was about the underlying data. And so we found ourselves at this kind of crossroad trying to figure out, well, how are we going to tackle this? How are we going to keep our management happy by continuing to deliver these great dashboards and capturing the KPIs? And around that time, there was a lot of hype, both inside and outside of the company, about data science, this buzzwordy term. And meanwhile, not just that, but our CEO was out there in major forums saying, data is the new currency, kind of like the keynote this morning had a similar comment from The Economist. And I read that, and it was almost like, you ever feel like the universe is trying to tell you something? It just sort of clicked, and I said, what we need to do is build a full-blown data science practice in order to keep moving the needle. And so, we did a study. We went around and talked to everybody. We read all of the literature. We had a lot of experimentation, a lot of learning by doing. But at the end of that, we crafted a data science strategy that has Tableau as a center point and has helped us to keep that needle moving, keep the innovation going like we wanted to. So let me talk about this for a second. If you are a data scientist or just a very data-savvy business person in our organization, what we'll provide for you is this data science package. And what we'll give is your own dedicated space in our data lake, and I'll talk about that more in a second. We'll give you your own desktop license. We'll even give you your own folder in our community Tableau site. And we'll even assign a data engineer from our team to support you as part of that. And then the data scientist is free to take this package and use it however they want. We've created a safe space for them to have full freedom and autonomy to do their work and do their experiments. They're free to bend the data, break the data. It's safe to do that. There's a few other things that we learned here that we felt were really, really important. One was this distributed model. We feel very strongly that it's important to have the data scientist embedded in the business area itself versus having just a central bench of data scientists and trying to have them understand all the various business areas. And data science really is at the intersection of having some computer science skills, having the math and stats knowledge, but also the business knowledge. The thing is, the business knowledge can vary so much across all the different business areas, even just in one organization. And it tends to be the hardest to come by. So what we strongly recommend and prefer is that the data scientists are also business experts as well, and they're embedded in the business. Now, data scientists can't do all their work on their own. We also believe data science is a team sport. And so instead of centralizing the data scientists, instead what we do is we centralize the resources, and we have a central bench of data engineers that we assign to support the data scientists. So the data engineers, they may not understand all the algorithms and the models, how to conduct the experiments that a data scientist would, but they do know where to go and hunt down the data and get the data sets that a data scientist would want. Another really key thing that we found was it's crucial to always keep in your mind and always start with, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What's the business value that we think we'll get out of this at the end? And sometimes data scientists requires a little bit of iteration and experimentation, and there needs to be space to do that. But it's important to always come back to these grounding questions. I can tell you, I've seen it too many times where someone will say, oh, well, if I just get a bunch of data scientists and a bunch of great data and a bunch of good tools, and then I lock them all in a room, magic is going to happen. Anyone else ever experienced that? I see some hands, some heads nodding. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. The other thing that we've seen is, sometimes, and no offense, data scientists, but sometimes, data scientists can be apt to, create a beautiful model for the sake of a beautiful model. And while that can be a beautiful thing and can lead to interesting insights later, it's important to ground that and bring it back to, well, what is the business value that this beautiful model can bring? One last point here. We also found that you don't want to take your most challenging data problem, your most challenging use case, and start with that as a way to cut your teeth on data science. Instead, it's better to start with the smaller use cases that you feel confident that you can solve, and then that builds your experience, and then builds more confidence to go solve the bigger use case. And then you keep doing that again and again until you're solving your most important challenges. So let me just show you a little bit more about our setup. So we have a data lake environment. It's based in Hadoop, by the way, just for your notes. The little squares that we made here, those are for the data scientists. And so that's the dedicated space that they get, and they can have full access to all the data. We can aggregate many data sources from across the company into their functional area, into their space. And again, they're free to use that however they wish and experiment with that. And then we'll give them access to this. You can see we have two different Tableau sites, and one of them is this community site, and we'll just give them a folder, and they're free to publish there, and the criteria are not that high. It's really about just being able to publish something for use in a small team to try it out and see if it makes a difference. And so a lot more flexibility in this community site. The big box in the data lake, that's internal, that's for our team. And out of that, that's where we're driving those 25 plus dashboards I showed you at the beginning. But this site is protected, and so we have another Tableau site associated with that that's a lot more protected, and we use all the security and access features that Tableau provides in order to make sure we're only sharing the dashboards with the folks that we want to. But the expectation here is different. Folks coming to use those dashboards, they want to know the data is vetted. They want to know that it is secure. They want, it needs to be set up for mass consumption of metrics. So they want fast refresh times. It's kind of a different beast. But this is the path that we created. You can start out in the community site doing more experimental work, but use that as a way to refine and continually improve your data. And then as it becomes mature, we have a process and criteria to then fit that into the protected site when your metric or your new dashboard or data product's ready for prime time. So this was the secret. This was the key, the trick that we found that answered that question from before of how do we keep the innovation going. What we decided was that we would take data scientists and empower them and give them the full freedom to work on these problems, give them all the resources needed to be able to do that. And in a way, as they were driving their particular use cases, their problems forward, they're improving the underlying data. They're adding value to the data along the way. And in a way, we get to crowdsource and sort of cherry pick the best ideas coming out of that to add to our collection of KPIs of all our key metrics for the organization. And so that's the way that we've been able to keep the innovation going and keep and keep improvement there. And so this is where we are with this. We have a lot of great traction with this approach right now. It's a journey, and I think you're going to get to see where we are in that journey with this use case that Ashok's going to share with you, and it's impressive and many dollars of savings along with that. So I will hand it over to Ashok now.
Thanks, Brian. Always fascinating to listen to your presentation, Ryan. Thank you. All right, so Brian said, start with the business problem first. Let me take a couple of minutes to explain what problem we were trying to solve. We are a part of the services organization, and I don't know if you've taken a note of it. We have about 1,400 depots across the world to serve our customers' service contracts. And we would like to stock these service contracts with a refurbished unit as far as possible. Because if we can't repair a unit, we'll have to stock with a new product, and that costs us 5 times more. So significant financial impact there. So the bottom line for our organization, which is the repair organization, is to repair and repair and repair more. Now, our repair manager has only 2 key strategic objectives to manage this. Number 1, across these hundreds of repair lines that we have at any given point in time, which ones should we prioritize from an operational stability standpoint? Because you might understand that given the scale and complexity of these operations involved, at any given point in time, there's tons of issues on these repair lines. And it's humanly just not possible to keep a tab on every repair issue at any given point in time. The second one, amongst the thousands of products within Cisco that we have not enabled repair on, and the new products that the Cisco Innovation Lab or the engineering team keeps coming up with, which ones should we focus on to enable more repair? Because repair costs us a lot of money too. I mean, to set up repair, sometimes it even costs us money or dollars to the tune of millions of dollars. So it's really important to prioritize. And to prioritize and take some objective decisions, the repair manager needs to answer a bunch of questions. Where are we spending a lot of repair? Where are we getting a lot of new buys on? How is the quality across various vendors? And so on and so forth. This is kind of only a small snapshot of all the questions that he needs to ask. And surprise, we have all the data in one place. No, just kidding. As you would expect in any complex organization, we have a different system to manage different functional areas of our business, which means that we have data spread across different systems. So the data sits in silos, and this is our starting point of the problems that we face. The data is in silos. Now, if the data is in silos, where there is an overlap of the data, you would see that the data is inconsistent because of the business rules involved, and because the data is inconsistent across systems, it's really difficult to stitch together the data, and it becomes really, really difficult to figure out what's the ROI involved, and so on. And the amount of effort that a repair manager needs to put in to figure out if there is an ROI, a positive ROI on just one product is huge. I mean, there's just no way that we can manage this across all the products, and the bandwidth, we just run out of the bandwidth. So these are the sort of problems that we've had within our organization. How many of you find these problems to be familiar? Have you seen these problems in your organization? Yeah. Great. I kind of expected, and I should have raised my hand too, because I saw these problems across the various roles that I did, various organizations that I was working for, and these problems are kind of common. So I thought this is probably a good use case on trying to talk to you about how did we actually solve this problem. And it was simple. We have always known that we got to stitch the data together and then build some visualization on top of it. So what's unique here? Trust me, if you had to go to IT and talk to them about this architecture, say that, hey, we want to get to this end state, they'll ask you for at least a few quarters of time. hundreds of thousands of dollars at least, if not millions, sometimes even millions. And thirdly, and most important of all, they would ask you for a clearly defined spec of what is it that your end state is going to look like. And none of these we actually had at our disposal because we did not know, we've never done this before because the scale of operations was so difficult. We never knew what's our end vision, our end product going to look like. We had to iterate, experiment. And so that's where we leveraged Mr. Palacio's framework, and it helped us so much. I mean, everything that he just shared with us was the starting point. I mean, we used that framework, and now with Tableau 10, you can actually integrate a lot of these into your Tableau extract using the cross-database joins, in case anyone's interested. But so we did that, and we built some visualizations on top of it. And this proved to be the turning point. So we built a couple of dashboards which looked a bit like this. Really, really simple dashboards. I'll give you a demo of these dashboards very soon. But I wanted to make a point. These dashboards were fairly simple, but they helped. I mean, the bar charts helped the repair managers figure out where is the biggest problem that they had to go solve. Clearly, the biggest bar that you see was the problem. And that was the starting point. I mean, you started this 30,000-foot view, and if the repair manager wanted additional details, on the click of a button, he gets all the details he needed at the product family or the individual unit or individual PID level. And he would have all the information as how much inventory do we have, what's the DGI, and how much repair, new buy, et cetera, on the fingertips. So this was like a game changer because going from a point where we had absolutely no data, now everyone had access to everything that they ever needed to make a decision on their fingertips. So first of all, this made life so much easier, so people started asking for or started using this data for their decisions. It was a quick turning point. So before I do the demo, I wanted to share with you one specific example of the benefits we've seen coming out of these dashboards. Sorry. These dashboards were extremely popular, but we wanted to see what's the benefit that we are actually getting out of these dashboards. We wanted to put some numbers around it. So initially, we tried to track a few of the decisions that repair managers were making based on these dashboards. And the red line you see here is a trend of the new buys. Sorry, before I talk to you about this. So these are some trend lines on the new buy and repair spend that we had for a bunch of Cisco products that are high runner, very expensive PIDs. So we set up a repair fairly early in their life cycle because we wanted to repair more. We intuitively knew that we would need a lot of repair on these products. So we set up repair on these PIDs. And from our standpoint, we thought our job is done because we have repair. We assumed that every unit that would be stocked in these depots would be using a repair product. So these, so the red line here shows the new buy that we were seeing, and the green line talks about the repair spend that we were seeing on these PIDs. And on the top, you have a cumulative trend of these repair and new buys that we were seeing over time. And you can see that we were spending a lot on the new buy, although we had repair on these PIDs. And that kind of spawned a question in our repair manager's mind. Why are we actually spending on new buys on these products, although we had repair set up? So a quick investigation, and no one knew that we were having these new buys until they had the dashboards. The dashboards gave them the visibility that the new buy was happening. So a quick investigation told us that our business unit forgot to turn off the failure analysis flag on these PIDs. And for those of you who don't understand failure analysis, when Cisco launches a new product into the market, every unit that comes back for a certain period of time, we want to take it through a failure analysis where we strip out every component, try to see how various components interacted, and debug and figure out what's going on so that we can improve the design of the product in the next iteration. But that happens only for the first 5 or 6 months of the product's launch. So in this case, these were fairly old products. And no reason for failure analysis flag to be turned on. And all we had to do was flip the flag back to turning off. And you can see that as soon as we did that, the new buys tapered off. We just didn't have any more new buys. And the repairs kind of shot through the roof. We had $1.5 million of repair put in. Imagine if we had not turned off the FA flag here, we wouldn't have had any more repair. Instead, all of this would have been a red line, which was more of new buy. So the point I'm trying to make is your dashboards or the data products that you create need not necessarily be just products which will help you to get answers to questions you need, but these are triggers. These dashboards will trigger the right questions within your operational people to get to the right answers and help you improve the operational efficiency. Now, this was one example where we used the data products, and there were many more like this. But we kind of stopped here because after seeing this, we knew that, hey, now we're going to have a lot more benefits coming out of these dashboards. So this was a quick example. And now I'd like to give you a quick demo. Sorry. Oops. Looks like my laptop went to a sleep mode listening to my talk. Hold on, we're coming up. Okay. Oh. So these, here's one of the dashboards. I mean, I created a bunch of them, maybe 2 or 3 for the users of the Repair Manager. But I'm going to talk about this one specific dashboard. So to start with, the Repair Manager only sees this, which is like a 30,000-foot view of where are we spending the most repair on. And this kind of gets bucketized into 3 categories. New buy on products we've already enabled for repair, new buy for products which we are currently trying to enable repair on, and products for which we do not have a repair yet. And you can imagine the sort of actions that you would have to take depending on these buckets. If I were a repair manager and the products are already repair enabled, I want to focus on which repair line do I go after to improve the operational stability. If we haven't yet started enablement on these products, we'll start thinking of prioritizing on these product enablements if it makes sufficient use case. And these products, specifically, these are more important areas for us because enablement in progress, we can just go talk to our planners, see if they can wait for a couple of months, if we have sufficient stocking already in our depots, and we can expedite the enablement process. It will help us to reduce the amount of new buys that goes on. And just on the click of a button, the click of a bar, the repair manager gets to see all the details that he or she ever needs to actually make these decisions happening in real time. So without getting into the specifics of the more Cisco-related specifics on what these new buys are doing, because I don't think you're interested in that. But I'm assuming you're going to be more interested in trying to understand what helped us to get to that adoption, which actually eludes most business intelligence products. So let me focus on some of those features. The first thing is when the landing page was really simple for our repair managers. You could see that all they could look at was something that their eyes and brain could absorb. Nothing complex here. Everything, all these codes are things that everyone understands. And the bar chart makes it really easy and simple to figure out where the biggest opportunity lies. Like this, the first one is obviously the most important. And if I were a repair manager, I'd click on that, I'd try to figure out what's going on, and so on. The second aspect was we created a small mini help page here, a light bulb, if you see. For any new repair manager who is coming in, it would have been difficult unless they had this help option to figure out how do they navigate this and use these dashboards to the benefit. Then we had some instructions on suggesting that, hey, you can actually use these navigations to drill down and look at the options. And lastly, but most importantly, we tried to eliminate any filter on this dashboard. Whoever has seen other BI dashboards, I'm pretty sure would be familiar that there are tons of filters. You have to select the year, you have to select the organization or whatever. But we tried to intentionally keep it really simple so that you can use the Wiz to actually get to the data that you need rather than having to select the filters. And that helped a lot because now the Wiz was directing folks to the data that they need rather than having to put in their filter option and then get to the data that they actually, and then figure out which data they would like to look at. So these were some really helpful things that helped us to kind of get to the adoption, in addition to the fact that it provided the data. The fundamental problem was that they didn't have the data. They had this data now, but in a much more easily accessible form, and that's what helped us to get the scale running in our favor. So back to our slide deck. Just to summarize, if I had to give you a quick summary of what should be your key takeaways from this to ensure that you have a good adoption within your organization, here's some best practices that have worked for us, and I'm sure it will work for you too, and we wanted to share this. Specifically, when you start off with your visualization data products, keep it as simple as possible for the end user. All the Wizes that I had shown you have a lot of complex Tableau calculations, table calculations, parameters, and so on, which some of you might be familiar with. But for the repair manager, we try to keep it absolutely simple so that they can kind of feel it's more intuitive. Lead user to the data using those bar graphs, which will help you to prioritize. Minimize the number of clicks on the dashboard through the filters or drop downs that may be required. The help option that I gave you, that was very, very popular. It helped a lot of people. Relevance, and this is my personal favorite, actually. Relevance to bias. I'm pretty sure in your databases, you'll have tons and tons of features and variables. And the default behavior is to give everything to your audience. But my recommendation is to take the time out, figure out what is it that's really important to your audience, and only provide those attributes. And let the user ask for more, and then you can start adding in. Because if you give everything, then there is a good chance that they will, again, find it too complex to actually follow you. Focus dashboards. once we created these dashboards, we had a lot of people coming to us and saying, hey, can you add my use case to this? It's kind of the adjoining space to what you just did. And our response was, sure, we will, but not on the same dashboard. We'll create a separate one for you. And that's because if you try to have a one-size-that-fits-all approach, once again, you're adding to the complexity. So we tried to not fit too many use cases on one dashboard. We were very clear on what that dashboard was supposed to do. And then you can create another one for any other adjoining use cases. And let's not forget the snippets of wisdom that Brian gave us initially. Always start with the business problem. Org structure, embed your data scientists in the business rather than having them as a centralized team. And I'm a living example of how this actually helps. And you've seen some of the benefits of doing that. Provide your data scientists with the independence and give them the tools and the framework required so that they can experiment and fail sometimes. That's fine. And finally, and most importantly, create the framework that Brian talked about, the community versus the protected side. That's a very helpful feature. So I think these would help you a lot as you move forward. So Brian, do you think there's anything else that I missed?
No, I think that was really great.
All right, cool. Thank you. So back to you.
Yeah, well, I think we can open it up to questions.
Okay. Yes.
Here, we got one right here in the front.
So I guess in terms of simplicity and relevance for the service manager, would each service manager then just use data for their depot? Is that the way it's set up?
Yeah. So the way we've set up, you've obviously seen one dashboard. Oh, sorry. Let me repeat the question. Sorry, I should have done that. The question was, between the relevance to comprehensiveness point that I was mentioning, his question was, would every service manager look at data that's specific to the depots that they're interested in, or do they look at everything? Because I didn't really give you that breakdown of everything. Since you asked, let me actually show you something. And that's a good question. So this framework provided them with the ability to look holistically across Cisco. Once they saw that, hey, there's a lot of repair issues happening, and oops, sorry, we had another, I know why my Tableau is not responding right now. But basically, we had another dashboard where they could actually zoom into the sites that they are looking at. And once again, it was not through filters or drop-downs. It was, again, oh, there you go. So it was, again, through the various sites that the repair managers could handle. And then if I were the site manager for UO4, and these are codes internal to Cisco, I can start focusing on that and then look at what are the product families and product details. So that's how they would use these dashboards now.
Thank you. That was a good question. I swear we didn't plan this question. We've never met before, right? We got a gentleman at the microphone.
Hey, okay. Question for Brian?
Yeah.
Brian, regarding your decentralized model for the data scientists, fully agree they should be embedded in the business, but also wondered, given how cross-functional data is these days, how do you still keep them connected though, so that they're not duplicating effort, trying to solve the same problem, things like that?
Great question. So when we were back thinking through how are we going to set this up, one aspect that we also thought through is building up a data science community within the organization. And so I believe all, or at least most of the data scientists know each other. They help each other out. And actually our role as a centralized team, we facilitate. So we facilitate building the community, but we also facilitate the connections. And there's times where folks will ask us to come help work on a certain use case. And we know enough about the business that we're able to say, wait a minute, that sounds really similar to what this other person's working on. And then we'll just make the connection. Hey, let's talk about this. We're all kind of working in the same direction. Yeah. So it's building that community forum, but also playing kind of matchmaker in the organization.
Thank you.
Not that tall. So I was chuckling a little bit when you jumped from the first slide where you had a lot of data sources, and then the second one where it was, okay, it's in Tableau, it's done. So I was wondering if you could share a little insight. How did everything fit together? Did you already have common keys? I know you said that they're usually, if you're going to spec things out, it's going to take years, and that's something I've struggled with, and I'm sure a lot of other people have too. So what really happened to suddenly have everything in Tableau and Magic?
That's a brilliant question. I can relate to what you just mentioned because of the complexity of this operation involved. I'm sorry, just go back to it. Right. So these. It's not a simple ask, and that's where I said you got to hide the complexity behind the scenes and make it simple for the user. If it were so simple, we could have integrated this a while back. I mean, the individual repair managers could have done that. And I don't know if you're from Cisco, but if you're with Cisco, I can probably talk to you about the specifics of where we kind of realized that there was a problem. And then Tableau helped us to a certain extent in integrating, because once you create these duplicate rows, because some of these common keys are not quite primary keys, right? So you got to familiarize yourself with the structure of the data within each of these data sources. And wherever there's these duplicates coming up, we either used, when we got down to the specifics, when we got down to the specifics here, because there were duplicates, for a few fields, we had to use max of the conditions, min of the conditions, and so on. Or sometimes we had to use table calculations. Sometimes we had to use parameters to ensure that these duplicates kind of get wiped out. So that's where having a thorough knowledge of Tableau helps, or Tableau, or whatever tool. In this case, maybe I should say Tableau because we're in the Tableau conference. But you need to have a really good understanding of the tool that you're working on, which will help you to kind of tide over those specific conditions that you said, where there are no primary keys, but those are common keys, and some amount of SQL coding, and it's a combination of different things. So I'll be happy to talk to you more offline in case you're interested.
I'll also just add onto that. So when we give that dedicated space in our Hadoop data lake environment, part of the intention is they can use that space to aggregate all the different data sources. And Ashok's very savvy and self-serves a lot, and some data scientists do and some data scientists don't, but we have this central bench of data engineers that will sit with you the whole time and work on all that stuff until it's the data set that you want. And these folks are very experienced with the underlying data. So they just know where all the weaknesses are and the strengths are, and they know when things will go wrong when you start to put some of these data sets together. So they're just experts in that. They don't have the same expertise that Ashok does in terms of, well, how do I take the data and create business value out of it? But they do know how to get clean data sets available for folks.
Hello. You mentioned in your strategy that you have something like a sandbox environment in your Hadoop data lake. My question is, how do you enforce some sort of a governance across your enterprise? So what means something to one group may mean the same thing to someone else.
So are you talking about keeping the data secure, or helping people to interpret or keep from misinterpreting data?
Yes, about the interpretations of the data. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think part of that refinement approach that I talked about, where we'll start out and initially a metric is created by a local team, a data scientist and some of the business folks around them, and then they'll publish it to this community site. and use it as a way to refine it. It'll start with a small group. They'll kind of kick the tires on it, make sure it makes sense, or add to it, change it depending on what they need. Then it goes to a broader group, and you keep refining and broadening the audience. And then eventually, and we also have some criteria, requirements to move it into this protected site. But by the time it's there, the metric is very refined, and we've identified it as a critical metric to the organization, and we've set it up in a way that it's really clear what it is, what you're looking at. And some of the principles Ashok was talking about in terms of, leading the user to the data. We lead them to the metric too, so they don't have to think a lot about what it is. Of course, we documented it as well, but that's part of our approach. And then I think the other piece is when we have all of our metrics captured in all of those different dashboards, we do very carefully manage using Tableau and the access controls you can put on Tableau. We very carefully manage the dashboards, and we kind of set up different dashboards depending on sensitivity levels, and then we manage the user base for each one of those dashboards. I'll give you an example. We have one dashboard where the data security is not the type of security that is giving away the company secrets. But here's the example. We have a planning group that plans all these parts that we buy or repair, and they're very careful about who gets to see their data, because and just to be honest, if you're a Cisco customer, we don't stock a part for each and every installation of that part and each and every customer. We know who the customers are, and we know roughly how many parts we need to stock to keep all those customers good. So sometimes the planning data will get into the hands of a sales guy, and they start looking at it and saying, well, wait, hold on, this is my account. How come you don't have a part in the depot for each and every one of my clients' installations? And then they start trying to do the planner's job. And the thing is, they don't have the understanding of how the network works, of the inventory works, and all of our rules that we use to plan our inventory. So in a way, they're there trying to do the planner's job. And instead of actually being able to plan parts, what they're doing is fielding questions from these sales guys and just trying to have this argument about why, no, this is the right way to do it, I swear. And so with that case, it's probably one of our most sensitive dashboards where we really do, each and every user that requests access to that, we vet it with the planning folks before and we have a process in the background that we have a tool that allows us to, check and provide, the access.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello. So this idea of decentralizing the development process for these reports, it seems very, it's not really novel, but I'm kind of surprised to hear it so consistently across different companies here. Is that common across other implementations of other systems in the company, or is this pretty, specific to the Tableau user group in your company?
It's a great question. Yeah. Well, so here's what I would say. I think generally that notion is prevalent in our company too. Just the idea of kind of crowdsourcing innovation and ideas is, so for us it came naturally to think through that way of setting it up. However, I've noticed it seems like there's a lot of other companies that have set it up similarly. So I think the way I think about it is, when smart people arrive at the same solution independently, then it must be a good one. So that's kind of the way I'm taking it.
Right. Okay.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Ashok. So I actually have two questions. So the first question is really about when you first came up with these dashboards, how did you socialize this tool to the, to the end user community, really the teams that were going to be using it, and address the need for user training, perhaps? And the second was really about change management of the dashboard. So you have a dashboard, and a month later, you're the developer, and you're like, okay, I want to tweak it, or I want to change something, or I want to do something better. How did you sort of manage, the ongoing maintenance of the dashboards that you have live?
Yeah. Gosh, I could talk for a whole session just on change management. We have a full-blown process that we've thought through very carefully. but lots of times when folks want dashboards built or data products built, they have an idea in mind. And so they would come to us, but we would have this process where it starts very early from the initial request, and we're getting in there and just asking questions to basically to help them get everything out on the table that they could possibly want. And then we have a process of trying to pare that down and refine that into an actual dashboard. And I'm kind of skimming through this. It's much more in depth. But then we'll go off, and when we'll do a few iterations of that, and when we're clear on what to build, we'll go build it. But then here's where the key part happens, is we'll launch it first as just like a beta. Try this out. It's not live yet. It's not intended to actually drive your business yet. We just want you, the business experts, to really kick the tires, to really try to break it, tell us everything that's possibly wrong with it. And then we'll take that as feedback, as enhancements. We'll go execute those enhancements, and then we'll share it again. And usually, again, we're doing it with a small audience of the SMEs first, and then as it gets more refined, bringing it out and out. And we will do as many iterations of that as we need to until we've covered, until we have a meeting where we ask the question, okay, what else can we add to this? And there's just silence. And then what we do is we watch the stats on the back end. And so we know, well, there's roughly this many people in this organization that we just built this dashboard, and it only looks like 25% of them are using it. And so then we'll go back again and ask, okay, look, we know you sounded like it was everything you wanted. We noticed it's not quite being used. What more can we add? So it's really, the crux of it is this practice of just continually going back and staying with the users and understanding the real challenges and the real things they're looking for, and just keep iterating it until it's adopted.
Yeah. And if I may add to that, Brian, Brian also mentioned about starting with the business problem. When you started, if the business problem was real and people were actually looking for something like this, that's half your battle won. And then you go through the process that Brian just mentioned for change adoption. But as you go through it, if there are, when you have, especially in this case, when you had like those 25, 30% people adopting the dashboards, and you see this use case, and you start sharing with people, then people feel even more compelled. I mean, this is one example where sharing this benefit with a wider organization kind of prompted more repair managers to start looking into it, because now they are under the hook. I mean, everyone wants to look good within their management's purview, right? So if you don't do this, then you're probably missing out on something. So that, in this case especially, we used this use case to our benefits. And then following through the process, the change management process that Brian mentioned kind of adds on to it.
I think we have time for one more question. Since you were standing, I'm going to let you go, since you were standing at the microphone.
Thank you.
And sorry to interrupt you. And find us later if you have more questions.
We're going to be here for some more time.
Yeah.
No, I found this presentation fabulous because it validates what we're doing. I was the data engineer, architected the data warehouse, put it all, and now I'm in the data scientist role. So now I'm using all that data a different way instead of developing. So my question more as a data scientist, what other kind of analysis, did you do any more in-depth analysis of that business question? I know I see the simple dashboards, but do you go deeper in, like doing any trend analysis or forecasting, any predictive analytics with that kind of business question?
Good question. I really love it.
And I could talk data all day too, so yeah.
Yeah. This is, to get to this, obviously we didn't have this as our end vision when we started with it. And this, we had to iterate and figure out what is it that's going to be most useful for the end users. But we certainly knew that this was the problem. And to figure out, as the other gentleman earlier asked, what's the structure of the data within each of these takes us quite a while. And we knew what questions repair manager needs to ask. So we started with understanding this structure, especially for this problem. That took us a lot of time. And how do we integrate all of this into one place? Again, takes a lot of time. Once you have these two, then you know that there is some way you can build this visualization, which is going to be easier for the end users to come up with. And then we started drawing a pictorial on a paper using pen, and then try to figure out what's probably the best approach going to be. And once we came up with this view, we kind of went through the process that Brian just mentioned, the change management, talking to people, getting their feedback, adding some additional features or attributes, so on. But specific to your question on whether we're doing some forecasting, predictive modeling, that's kind of slightly different. I mean, we didn't really use much of it in this use case, but there are other problems where we are not necessarily using Tableau, but we are probably using R and other Python-related data mining. So we're actually building one predictive model right now where we do a lot of these trainings. I'll be happy to talk to you more offline in case you're interested in specifics. That's an area that I'm passionate about too, so sure, we can talk more.
Okay, I think we need to wrap up there. But just thank you, everyone. We hope that from this presentation you got some ideas or strategies, best practices that you can apply to your own areas, to your own businesses. And if so, one thing I urge you, I mean, these are some of the best practices that we ended up with. Feel free to take a snapshot of this. I don't know if that's allowed or not, but I won't tell anyone. And go back and think about how some of these specific things may actually help you and improve how you're using Tableau and how you're improving your business areas and your businesses with data. And then also, if you have further questions, find us in the conference, or you got our emails there. Thank you.
Thank you.